The little girls cried loudly as their mother threw them on the bed and began packing her clothes into a bag. Her face was tight with anger like someone ready to fight the whole world. Mr. Adewale, her husband, said gently, "The babies are crying. They need their mother." But Rita answered in a cold and sharp voice, "They are no longer my concern. I'm leaving you." She continued stuffing her clothes into the bag without looking at him. "Please don't go," Adewale begged. "If not for me, then stay for the sake of these innocent children God gave us." Rita turned to him and snapped, "I didn't marry you to suffer. Since you can't give me the life I want, I'm done. Don't come looking for me. As for the babies, do whatever you want with them. I don't care." She paused, twisted her lips bitterly and added, "To be honest, I don't even care if they live or die." With that, she zipped up her bag and stormed out of the house, slamming the door hard behind her. Everything had once been peaceful between Adewale and his wife. But things changed the day he lost his job. Since then, Rita had been threatening to leave. She complained about everything, the small room they moved into, the plain food they had to eat. Adewale kept begging her, not just because he loved her, but for the sake of their little daughters, Amina and Kemi, who were just 3 months old. But Rita never listened. Mr. Adewale carried the babies in his arms and gently cuddled them. Though they kept crying, he rocked them back and forth until they slowly calmed down. As he looked at their innocent faces, his heart grew heavy, but his voice was firm. "I may not have money to give you the best life," he whispered. "But I promise I will be the best father in the whole world to you." He kept rocking them softly, and not long after, the twin girls drifted off to sleep. The next morning came with hunger and worry. Mr. Adewale woke up with no food, no money, and 2 crying babies, Amina and Kemi, needing to be fed. There was no time to feel sorry for himself. He had to move. He had to provide. Since he no longer had a company job, he went out and hired a wheelbarrow. Then he strapped the babies to his chest and headed to Bodija Market in Ibadan to look for work. He began pushing heavy bags for people. Many stared. Some looked at him with pity. Some smiled and placed small coins in his hands for the babies. One elderly woman with deep concern written on her face stopped him and said softly, "You're doing a great job." Then she pressed 500 naira into his palm. "This is for the babies." Mr. Adewale bowed his head slightly and thanked her, then continued his work. But not everyone was kind. One loudmouth lady hissed and shouted, "Enjoyment master! When you were busy enjoying in bed, you didn't think of responsibility. Now suffer alone." Mr. Adewale heard her loud and clear. Her words stung, but he said nothing. He didn't care what anyone thought. The only thing that mattered to him was that his little girls would be okay. After a long day of hard work, Mr. Adewale returned home. Even though he had spent the whole day pushing heavy loads while caring for his babies, he felt happy. He had made enough money to take care of his girls. That evening, he went to a nearby pharmacy and spoke to the pharmacist. He explained his situation and asked for help with things he needed to feed his babies. The kind pharmacist made a list for him. It included powdered milk for infants and some basic medicine for baby care. Mr. Adewale paid for everything and returned home, feeling grateful. Day after day, he continued to work with the twins tied to his chest. He had no one else to help. His mother had passed away and he had no sisters. It was exhausting, but he never complained. In fact, he felt joy in his heart knowing that he was able to care for his daughters. At first, he didn't believe he could do it, but now he was managing, and the babies were doing fine. One Monday morning, as he stepped out with his wheelbarrow, a familiar voice called out to him. It was Mama Ronk, an elderly neighbor. She walked up and said, "Let me take the babies today. I'll watch over them until you return." Mr. Adewale hesitated. She added gently, "I want to help you. Besides, the sun is too hot for these little ones. Don't worry, I will take good care of them." After thinking for a moment, Mr. Adewale handed the babies to her and left for work. Though he was relieved from the stress of carrying the babies around all day, his heart was still restless. Those girls were his whole world. Since their mother left, he had formed an unbreakable bond with them. He would give his life to protect them. Mama Ronk, as everyone called her, was poor, but she was kind-hearted. She took care of the babies with love. She fed them, bathed them, and dressed them gently. When Mr. Adewale came back in the evening, he found his daughters giggling happily in Mama Ronk's arms. He smiled with deep thanks and took them home. From that day on, Mama Ronk helped him anytime he went out with his wheelbarrow. The twin girls grew up knowing 2 people, their loving father and Mama Ronk, the woman they called Mama. Amina and Kemi didn't attend the best private schools, but their father made sure he worked hard to pay their school fees and buy all the books they needed. He also taught them how to be kind, respectful, and hardworking. At 18 years old, the twins graduated from Oratamifa Community Secondary School. Mr. Adewale was filled with pride. The girls studied day and night for their WAEC and JAM exams. Amina scored 325 in her JAM. Kemi scored even higher, 341. Both of them got admission to study medicine and surgery at the University of Ibadan. But that was when the real struggle began. One afternoon, Amina and Kemi came home laughing and full of excitement. They ran to their father and handed him their printed JAM result slips. Mr. Adewale smiled and congratulated them. "Oh, my daughters, you've done well. I'm so proud of you. Now I can walk in the city with my shoulders raised high. My daughters will soon become doctors," he said, pretending to walk like a big man, his chest puffed up. They all laughed together. The house was full of joy. But later, Mr. Adewale went quietly into his room, and his smile faded. He sat on the edge of the bed, silent and heavy-hearted. He had no money, not even enough to sponsor one of them. He was completely broke. He lowered his head and whispered to himself, "All these years of hard work. Now my daughters have made it and I can't pay their fees." He felt like he was drowning, helpless and ashamed. But then he clenched his fists and muttered, "No, I won't let money stop them. I will do whatever it takes. My daughters must become doctors." The next morning, Mr. Adewale rose very early, long before the twins woke up. But this time he didn't carry his wheelbarrow. He knew deep in his heart that what he needed now was far beyond what that old barrow could provide. He walked with heavy steps to the home of a wealthy man in Agodi GRA, a rich neighborhood in Ibadan, and asked to speak with him. The rich man, still in his pajamas, looked at him with suspicion. "What business brings you to my house this early in the morning?" Mr. Adewale dropped to his knees and said, "Please, sir, I want you to take me as your houseboy. I will do anything you say. Wash your clothes, cook your food, sweep your compound. Just help me send my 2 daughters to the university. I will work for you like a slave until they graduate." He explained to the man how Amina and Kemi were his life, the only joy left in his world. He begged the man with all his heart. But the rich man shook his head and said coldly, "Training 2 students in medicine and surgery is no child's play. I will not do it." Mr. Adewale stood up quietly and left. He didn't stop there. He went to 5 more rich houses, one after the other. Each time he knelt and begged, offering to serve in exchange for his daughter's education. But they all said no. Tired and broken, Mr. Adewale returned home. For 2 days he came back from work without saying much. He was quiet. His heart was heavy. He didn't know how to tell his daughters that their dreams might not come true. But one evening he gathered his courage and called them into his room. "My daughters," he said softly, "I'm sorry. I failed you both. Please forgive me. I made a promise long ago when you were little, that I would send you to the ends of the earth to study. But now, I don't even have enough to send you to university." He tried to stay strong but his voice cracked. He turned his face away and swallowed hard to stop the tears. Kemi stood up and said gently, "Daddy, there's nothing to forgive. We know how much you love us. We know you would have sent us even to the moon if you had the money." Amina added, "Whether we go to university or not, we love you always." They both wrapped their arms around their father and hugged him tightly. That night, when Mr. Adewale was sure his daughters were asleep, he knelt quietly beside his bed and began to cry to God. His voice was low but the pain in it was deep. "God, please help me. I have nothing but you have everything. My girls deserve this chance. Please, Lord, help me send them to school." He wept bitterly, hitting his hands on the floor. His shoulders shook. He begged God like a man drowning in sorrow. But Amina and Kemi were awake. They heard everything. It tore their hearts to pieces. All their lives their father had been their rock. He never cried, never complained, even when life was hard. But tonight he was crying, weeping because of them. They buried their faces in their pillows and sobbed quietly. The next few days passed with a little peace in the house. Amina and Kemi, though sad, stayed strong. They took a bold step. They went to the university and deferred their admission. It was painful, but they had a plan. They wanted to work, save money, and help their father by next year. One day they went out together to search for a job. After many rejections, they found one in a neat and decent restaurant at Makola roundabout, not far from home. Amina and Kemi started working there immediately. They greeted customers with smiles, served food with care, and showed respect to everyone. Customers liked them and gave them generous tips. Some men tried to take advantage of their poverty, but the twins stood their ground. They refused to sell their dignity. They saved almost every penny they earned. At night, they would count their money and pray with their father. Mr. Adewale never stopped praying for them. Every day he knelt down and called on God to bless the work of their hands. After about 7 months of hard work, saving and prayer, Amina and Kemi opened a small restaurant of their own. It wasn't big, but it was clean, neat, and beautifully arranged. They cooked delicious food and treated every customer like family. They also used social media to advertise. Before long, customers started coming in large numbers. The little restaurant became popular. Amina and Kemi were finally rising. They continued saving every bit of the money they made. The dream of becoming doctors still burned in their hearts. But life had its own path. Fate, however, had something different in store. One evening, after a long, tiring day at the restaurant, Amina was cleaning the tables when she noticed a black briefcase under one of the chairs. "Look, Kemi," she said, holding it up. "Someone must have forgotten this." Curiosity got the better of them. They opened the briefcase carefully and froze. Inside were many important-looking documents and a thick pile of American dollars. Kemi's eyes widened. This person must be very rich. They didn't waste time. They closed the briefcase and took it home. When Mr. Adewale saw it, he listened to the girls quietly, then nodded. "You did the right thing bringing it home. Don't worry, the owner will definitely come looking for it. This bag is too valuable to lose." The next morning, the girls returned to the restaurant early with the briefcase. As they arrived, they saw a rich-looking man standing beside a shiny black car, looking worried. When they greeted him, he immediately asked, "Did you by chance see a black briefcase?" "Yes," Amina replied, reaching into the sack they carried. She handed it over carefully. The man looked at it, visibly relieved. "Thank you very much," he said quickly, collected the briefcase, entered his car, and drove off without another word. Kemi blinked. "He should have at least given us one of those dollars," she joked. Amina laughed. "So in your mind now you want dollars? I'll start calling you Lady Dollars." They both laughed and walked into the restaurant to begin the day's work. They were still the only two workers in the place. It hadn't grown enough to hire more hands, but they remained hopeful. Every day was a step forward. Around midday, as the sun blazed down on the bustling streets of Ibadan, the same man who had taken the briefcase earlier returned. He drove up in the same shiny car, but this time he wasn't in a rush. He stopped and smiled at Amina and Kemi. "I'm Prince Femi," he introduced himself, stepping out of the car. "For your honesty and faithfulness, I want to reward you." Amina and Kemi exchanged hopeful glances, wondering if this would finally be the moment they received a little extra money. But to their surprise, Prince Femi didn't hand them any money. Instead, he took them to a large, impressive building at Jericho in Ibadan. "This is for you," he said. "The documents in the briefcase were more valuable than the money. You saved my family by preserving that bag. Now I want you to have this building for your restaurant. It's all yours." Amina and Kemi stood there shocked. They couldn't believe it. They had worked so hard. And now it seemed like a dream come true. Grateful tears welled up in their eyes as they thanked him over and over again with hearts full of joy. They quickly took a taxi and made their way to find their father. They spotted him at the market, standing by his wheelbarrow, drinking a refreshing glass of kunu. Without a word, they ran to him, throwing their arms around him. People in the market stared, amazed at the sight of these two beautiful young women embracing the poor man. Mr. Adewale laughed, shaking his head in disbelief. "Sit," he said with a warm smile. "Let me buy you some kunu." They sat down with him, sipping the cool drink, their excitement bubbling over. Finally, Kemi spoke. "We have a surprise for you, Daddy." "What is it?" Mr. Adewale asked. His curiosity piqued. He smiled, wondering what his daughters had in store. Words couldn't express their excitement, so they simply stood up, motioning for him to follow them. Mr. Adewale immediately got to his feet and followed them. When they reached the large building, Amina's voice rang out with excitement. "It's ours, Daddy. The man who lost the briefcase gave it to us. He said we should open our restaurant here." Tears of happiness filled Mr. Adewale's eyes. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. The restaurant, the new beginning, the reward for his daughter's honesty, it was everything he had ever dreamed of for them. They all celebrated together, laughter and joy filling the air as they stood in front of the building that was now their own. That evening at home, Amina and Kemi sat down with their father. They could see the strain in his face, the years of hard work taking their toll. Amina spoke softly but firmly. "Dad, it's time for you to stop pushing the wheelbarrow. You're not getting any younger. This kind of hard work is for younger men, not for you." Kemi nodded in agreement. "We've got this now. You've given us everything we need to succeed. and now it's time for you to rest. Mr. Adewale opened his mouth as if to argue, but he saw the determination in their eyes. He couldn't help but be moved by their words. They had worked so hard and now they were standing tall, no longer dependent on him. With a heavy heart, but a feeling of immense pride, Mr. Adewale agreed to retire from his hard labor that day. Prince Femi didn't just give them the building. He had furnished it with new chairs, tables, plates, and pots. He had provided everything they needed to make the restaurant a success. The girls put their hearts into making the place perfect. Amina and Kemi's restaurant was soon bustling with activity. The atmosphere was classy, inviting, and warm. The food was mouth-watering, and their hospitality, kind, patient, and genuine, became a driving force behind the restaurant's rapid success. Soon, customers were flocking in, enjoying both the delicious meals and the welcoming ambience. The restaurant was no longer just a business. It was a symbol of hope, a way out of poverty, and the dream realized through hard work and perseverance. More importantly, the girls made sure to take care of their father. He no longer had to work in the heat. They treated him like a king, providing for him in ways he had never dreamed of. His tired, weathered hands no longer needed to carry heavy loads. Instead, he spent his days enjoying the fruits of their labor, knowing that his sacrifices had led them here. But Amina and Kemi didn't forget the ones who had helped them along the way. They remembered Mama Ronk, who had helped them when they were babies. She was old now, often sick, but she had been a pillar of support in their lives. Amina and Kemi made sure her life was as comfortable as possible. They renovated her little house, making it cozy and livable. Every month, they sent her money, paid her hospital bills, and made sure she never lacked anything. Their kindness to Mama Ronk was just as heartfelt as their love for their father. They knew the value of gratitude, and they wanted to ensure that those who had helped them along the way were never forgotten. One afternoon, a woman walked into the restaurant looking lost and weary. "What do you want?" one of the ladies working asked, her voice laced with curiosity. The woman looked up, her eyes filled with hope. "I'm looking for a job," she said softly. "I can do anything. Wash plates, mop the floors, serve dishes. Please, I just need work." Though there was no vacancy for a new employee, Amina and Kemi felt a strange pull in their hearts for the woman. They couldn't explain it, but they decided to offer her a chance. They gave her the job to wash dishes. Unbeknownst to them, this woman was Rita, their mother. After 3 failed marriages to wealthy men, she had been left with nothing. Back at square one, she had used, and been used. But this time it seemed she had nowhere else to go. The next day Mr. Adewale came to visit his daughters. After exchanging pleasantries, he walked into the kitchen, and there he saw her. Rita. She hadn't noticed him, so he quietly stepped back, his heart heavy with memories. He found his daughters and sat them down, his voice tinged with a quiet seriousness. "Do you have a new dishwasher?" "Yes, Daddy," Amina replied. "Do you know her?" "No," they both answered, looking puzzled. "But why are you asking about her?" He cleared his throat, his words slow and deliberate. "That woman is Rita, your mother." Naomi's eyes widened in disbelief. "What? Our mother?" "Yes," Mr. Adewale said quietly. "She's your mother. After she left, I burned every picture of her. The memories were too painful. So, you've never seen her face." The 3 of them walked into the kitchen. When Rita saw Mr. Adewale standing there, her face drained of color. She froze, unable to speak a word. Her hands, wet from washing plates, trembled. Mr. Adewale took a deep breath and turned to her, his voice steady but heavy with emotion. "The women who employed you, they are your daughters." Rita's lips quivered. Her knees buckled slightly. I'm so sorry. "I'm so sorry, my daughters." The words came in soft sobs, barely audible, as she bowed her head in regret. Amina's face hardened, a storm of emotion brewing in her eyes. "You have to leave," she said firmly. She picked up a handful of cash from the counter and handed it to Rita. "This is more than you've worked for. Go somewhere. I don't know you and you are not my mother." "My mother is Mama Ronk," she added, her voice breaking, "not the stranger who abandoned us." Tears welled up, but the anger still burned in her chest. Kemi, who had been quietly watching the scene unfold, wrapped her arms around her sister, holding her tightly. "I know you're hurting, Amina, and so am I," she said softly, her voice filled with compassion. "But please, don't send her away. Not now. She needs our help." Amina's face twisted with grief, her tears now flowing freely. "I don't want to help," she whispered. Then pointing at Rita, she cried out, "This woman left us. She walked away while we were left to suffer and die with our father. She didn't look back, not even once." The pain in her voice was raw. Her sobs echoed through the room, deep and painful. But slowly as the emotion poured out, she began to calm. The weight of the grief lightened even if just for a moment. Rita, trembling, reached out to them. Her voice filled with remorse. "I'm sorry, my daughters. Please forgive me. I was young, foolish, and selfish. Please forgive me." That evening Mr. Adewale sat down with his daughters. His face was etched with quiet sadness. The conversation that followed was a hard one. The air was thick with tension. But in the end, their hearts softened. They forgave Rita, though it was not an easy decision. The next day, Amina and Kemi decided to give her a new role in the restaurant. They couldn't bear the thought of her still washing dishes. She would become the matron, overseeing operations, a role that would allow her to show responsibility and earn respect. At first, Rita seemed to embody the kindness the restaurant needed. The staff had no issue with her, and customers seemed to warm to her gentle presence. But over time, something changed. Rita's temper flared. Her once soft voice became sharp and commanding. She began to bully the workers, snapping at them for minor mistakes. Her attitude soured like spoiled milk. The atmosphere in the restaurant grew tense. Staff started to avoid her. Customers began to notice the shift in tone. Slowly, like a leak in a boat, the restaurant's popularity began to slip. The warmth and joy that had once filled the place were now replaced by unease. Amina and Kemi noticed the change but didn't know how to fix it. The business they had built with sweat and prayer seemed to be slipping through their fingers. One evening they sat their mother down. Their faces were somber, their voices steady with concern. "Mummy, we need to talk to you," Kemi began. "You're here to help us," Amina added, "but your attitude is hurting everything we've worked for." Rita's expression darkened. "I am your mother," she snapped. "I brought you into this world. You can't tell me what to do." Amina took a deep breath. "That may be true. But this is our business. And your actions are affecting everyone." Rita's eyes narrowed. "Where is your father?" she spat. "The one you always give money to. He's lazy. Just sitting at home. But me, all you give me is salary." Kemi's face paled. Amina stood slowly, her tone ice cold. "I will have a serious problem with you," she said firmly, "if you ever speak badly about my father again." But Rita wasn't done. Her voice rose, sharp and bitter. "You don't love me," she said, her lips trembling with resentment. "You're just managing me here out of pity." The conversation turned into a heated exchange, with neither side willing to back down. Every word Rita threw at them dug up old wounds, and every response from the girls revealed the depth of betrayal they still carried. Finally, emotionally exhausted and frustrated, Amina and Kemi went to their father that night. Mr. Adewale listened quietly, not interrupting. His face was calm, but his eyes held a sorrow that ran deep. After a pause, he spoke with the quiet strength they knew so well. "She is still your mother," he said. "But if you allow her to continue like this, she'll destroy everything you've worked so hard to build." They were silent. He added gently, "I forgave her, not because she earned it but because I wanted peace. Now you must protect your peace too." The next morning, Amina and Kemi made their decision. They called Rita into the office, the same back room where they had once dreamed up menus and business plans. "We're sorry, Mummy," Kemi began, "but we've decided that you can no longer work in the restaurant." Rita's reaction was immediate and fiery. "I knew it," she exploded, standing up. "It's your stupid father that poisoned your minds against me. He's always been jealous." But Amina and Kemi stood their ground. They watched as their mother stormed out, slamming the door behind her, her harsh words lingering in the air like a sour aftertaste. Still, despite the pain, they didn't send her away empty-handed. They opened a small shop for her right in front of her house, a manageable provision store. She could be independent, earn her own money, and live in dignity. It wasn't the ideal solution, but it was something. Mr. Adewale, though deeply hurt by everything that had happened, found himself torn. He still remembered the woman he once loved, the mother of his children. But Rita's behavior had driven him too far. He wanted peace. And now, for the first time in many years, he finally had it. Meanwhile, the restaurant flourished again. With Rita gone, the warmth returned. The laughter of customers filled the halls. Staff worked with joy and the atmosphere healed. The business began to grow faster than ever. Amina and Kemi opened new branches across Ibadan, and soon, other cities in Nigeria followed. Lagos, Abuja, Port Harcourt. Their names were becoming known. But more than the money, they found something greater: peace, dignity, and purpose. Their father was content. No longer burdened by pain or poverty, He spent his days surrounded by love, food, and laughter. One evening, after locking up the main branch, the twins sat at the garden table behind the restaurant. The moonlight bathed the space in silver. They watched staff saying goodnight and families eating happily. Then Kemi broke the silence. "Amina, do you still want to become a doctor?" Amina looked around, eyes misty. "The fire, it's no longer inside me." She paused, then smiled. "I love this. I love our business. I love how we make people happy. This place it's God's answer to Daddy's prayers." Kemi nodded. "I feel the same." They knew deep down that their purpose had shifted. Medicine had been the dream. But this was the calling. Together they sat in silence, holding hands full of peace. Until one morning, a new excitement filled the air. Suitors began to appear. Suitors began to appear. Some were sons of business tycoons, others came from noble homes. A few were even celebrities. But Amina and Kemi were not easily swayed. They weren't impressed by fancy cars or smooth talk. They had seen what broken promises and shallow love looked like. They were careful. They prayed. They watched. They tested character. Eventually, after months of quiet courtship, both sisters found men who were not only kind but also shared their values. Men who respected their father, treated Mama Ronk like a queen, and understood the weight of their journey. One Sunday evening, Amina and Kemi sat their father down, hands clasped in their laps like little girls again. "Daddy," Amina began gently, "we have something to tell you." Mr. Adewale looked up, smiling. "Let me guess. You found husbands." They burst into laughter, surprised by his accuracy. "Yes," Kemi replied, cheeks flushed with joy. "And we want to marry on the same day." Adewale leaned back slowly in his chair. His face was calm but his heart pounded. He had prayed for this day, but now that it was here, something tugged at him. He smiled proud. "You have my blessing." But after a moment, Kemi's face turned thoughtful. "Daddy, we're worried." "About what?" he asked. "About leaving you alone." Amina nodded. "You've spent your whole life taking care of us. But now we're leaving home. And we don't want you to be lonely." He chuckled gently. "As long as I know you are happy, I will be fine." But the girls shook their heads. They had a different plan. Kemi reached out and held his hand. "Daddy, we found someone. Someone kind. Someone we trust." Mr. Adewale looked from one daughter to the other. "Who?" Amina smiled. "Her name is Madame Ruth. She works in one of our restaurants. She lost her husband 5 years ago. She has 2 children, both in secondary school. She's been a mother figure to many of our staff," Kemi added. "And she always gives us wise advice. We love her spirit. And we believe she can be your companion." Adewale was speechless. His heart beat faster than he wanted to admit. He had closed the door to love many years ago. But something in the way his daughter spoke made him curious. "I'll need time to think," he said slowly. They didn't press him. They only nodded, smiling, hopeful. 2 days later, Adewale met Madame Ruth. She was graceful, calm, and wise. She didn't try to impress him, she was just herself. And in her simplicity, he saw something he hadn't felt in a long time. He gave his consent. The wedding date was set, and for the first time in local memory, the church buzzed with 3 wedding ceremonies on the same day. Mr. Adewale, Amina, Kemi. The day was magical. The choir sang joyfully. Guests from far and wide came to witness what they called the wedding of grace. Mama Ronk stood as the chief mother of the day, dressed in royal blue lace, her eyes shining with pride. Everyone wept tears of joy. From street vendors to business magnates, all who had followed their story came to celebrate. It was more than a wedding. It was a testimony. After the grand wedding, life blossomed in new directions. Amina and Kemi moved into their respective homes, but not far from their father's new house. A lovely bungalow they had built for Mr. Adewale and Madame Ruth in the heart of Iaganku GRA. It was peaceful, surrounded by flowering trees, and filled with the sound of laughter and new beginnings. Madame Ruth's children, Tafunmi and Deo, quickly became part of the family. Amina and Kemi treated them like their own siblings, enrolling them in the best schools and mentoring them with the same values that had shaped their lives. Meanwhile, the restaurant chain, now rebranded as Twins of Grace Kitchen, became a national sensation. From Ibadan to Lagos, Abuja to Enugu, every branch carried the same culture of kindness, excellence, and generosity. Each location had a framed photo of Mr. Adewale, Mama Ronk, and the twins, a reminder of the roots of their success. But with growth came responsibility. The sisters began organizing free feeding programs every Sunday for the poor and homeless. They also launched a scholarship fund named after their late grandmother and Mama Ronk, helping hundreds of underprivileged students complete their education. Mr. Adewale, now gray-haired and dignified, spent his days visiting branches, mentoring young workers, and enjoying quiet walks with Madame Ruth in the evenings. He had no regrets, only gratitude. Rita, on the other hand, kept running her small shop. She never remarried. She watched from afar as her daughters became household names. Though the relationship never returned to what it could have been, Amina and Kemi never stopped sending her monthly allowances, food supplies, and check-ins through trusted staff. They honored her, not because of who she had been, but because of who they had become. One rainy evening, Kemi stood by the window of her office in the flagship branch at Ring Road, watching the storm clouds pass. A soft knock came at the door. It was Amina. She walked in holding 2 steaming mugs of tea. "I needed a break," she said, handing one to her sister. They sat together on the couch, sipping in silence for a while, watching the rain fall. "Do you ever wonder what our lives would have been like," Amina began softly, "if Mummy never left?" Kemi thought for a moment, then smiled gently. "Maybe we wouldn't have fought so hard. Maybe we would have taken things for granted. But I don't think we would have become these women. These strong, grateful, kind women." Amina nodded. "I agree." They clinked their mugs together gently. "To Papa. To Grace. To the pain that pushed us. And the love that saved us." They smiled, eyes misty, hearts full. Outside, the rain began to clear, leaving behind a sky of deep blue, like a fresh chapter waiting to be written. Months after the weddings, the family continued to thrive. Amina and Kemi were not just successful businesswomen anymore. They had become national icons. They were invited to speak at conferences, women's empowerment events, and university panels. People wanted to hear their story, the girls who rose from nothing, who turned heartbreak into hope. Their story was even featured on NTA Channel's TV, and later made international headlines. Meanwhile, their restaurants continued to multiply. They opened branches in Ilorin, Benin, Uyo, and even started scouting land in Accra, Ghana. But through it all, they never changed. They still wore simple clothes when they weren't at official events. They still knelt to greet elders. They still called Mama Ronk every other day. They still brought their father fresh soup every Sunday. One day, during a visit to the Ibadan main branch, Amina sat in the restaurant's upstairs office and scrolled through customer feedback. A particular message caught her eye. "Twins of Grace Kitchen reminds me of what home used to feel like. Please open a branch in London. We need you here." She showed it to Kemi and they both smiled. "Should we?" Kemi asked. "Let's pray about it," Amina replied. That night, after family dinner, they brought it up with Mr. Adewale and Madame Ruth. They sat on the balcony under a calm Ibadan sky. "Papa," Amina began, "what do you think about the United Kingdom?" He looked at her and chuckled. "I think it's cold. But if God opens that door, walk through it." Within months, plans were in motion. The sisters traveled to London, made business inquiries, met with potential partners, and scouted locations in Peckham and Lewisham, where large Nigerian communities lived. The moment they signed the first lease, they called home. "Daddy," Kemi said over the phone, her voice cracking. "We did it. We're going international." Mr. Adewale said nothing at first. Then he laughed quietly. "So, the girls I raised with Pap in Accra are now taking Nigeria to the world." Tears filled their eyes. It had all begun in a tiny one-room house. With crying babies. With a father pushing a wheelbarrow through Bodija Market. With neighbors laughing at them. With rice measured in cups and soap cut into two. A restaurant in London. A global name. A testimony of mercy, grit, and grace. The London branch opened with style and humility. The grand opening was attended by Nigerians in the UK diaspora, British food critics, community leaders, and even representatives from the Nigerian High Commission. The smell of jollof rice, pepper soup, egusi, amla, and fried plantain filled the air, stirring nostalgia in the hearts of every Nigerian guest. Amina and Kemi stood side by side, dressed in elegant Ankara gowns, their voices steady as they addressed the crowd. "We are not just here to serve food," Amina said. "We are here to serve a story. A story of a father's sacrifice. A mother's second chance. A nation's resilience." Kemi added, "Twins of Grace is more than a name. It's who we are. And who we pray to remain, forever." The crowd clapped thunderously. The London branch sold out its entire menu by 4 p.m. Soon after, they received partnership offers from Dubai, Atlanta, and even Nairobi. But the sisters chose to grow slowly, preserving their values and refusing to be driven only by profit. Back home in Ibadan, Mr. Adewale sat in his living room watching the opening ceremony live on TV. He leaned back in his chair, eyes wet with silent tears. Madame Ruth sat beside him, gently holding his hand. "They did it," he whispered. "Yes," she replied. "And so did you." Later that evening, Amina and Kemi called him. He answered with his usual warm tone. "Hello, my daughters." "Daddy," Amina said, "we're flying you and Mummy Ruth out next week. We want you both to come and see the new branch." "I've never entered a plane before," he chuckled. "Then it's time," Kemi replied, laughing. The flight was arranged. The following week, Mr. Adewale stepped into Murtala Muhammad International Airport, guided by his daughters and hugged by airport staff who recognized him from the media. He boarded the plane, calm, dressed in his well-ironed agbada, holding Ruth's hand. At Heathrow they were welcomed with flowers and cheers. A giant sign at the arrivals section read, "Welcome Papa Adewale, the father of faith." When they visited the restaurant, every staff member bowed in respect. He was given a golden seat in the center of the hall. He took a bite of pounded yam and oha soup and nodded with pride. "Tastes just like home." The legacy was complete. Not because of wealth but because of love. Sacrifice. Redemption. Back in Ibadan, Mama Rank's health was declining. She was now in her late 80s. She could barely walk, barely eat. But the girls spared no expense. They brought the best doctors, nurses, and medications. She was moved to a private room in a top hospital. One night, with her frail hands wrapped in Amina's and Kemi's, she smiled and whispered, "You made me proud, children. Tell your father, he did well." Those were her last words. She passed peacefully in her sleep, a small smile still on her face. Her funeral was grand, not because of the money spent, but because of the lives she had touched. Tributes poured in from across the nation. The twins renamed their flagship branch in Bodija, Mama Rank's Table. A plaque outside read, "Dedicated to the woman who said yes when the world said no." Years passed. Amina and Kemi became mothers themselves. Each had a set of twins, a strange, divine twist neither of them had expected. They raised them with the same love, prayer, and discipline their father had shown them. One quiet morning, sitting on the same bench where they once cried with their father, Amina turned to Kemi. "Do you ever think about her, Rita?" Amina nodded. Kemi sighed. "Sometimes. But not with anger anymore." They were silent for a while. "She gave us life," Amina whispered. "But Daddy gave us everything else." They both smiled, watching their own children run around the garden, squealing with laughter. A new generation. A new beginning. A legacy, carved from suffering, but crowned with grace.